This is the Palin Update on SaraNet Radio. I'm Kevin Scholla.
Work hard and feel good knowing that the best is yet to come. This is a great awakening. The age of Obama is almost over.
And with the right people elected to the Senate, Obama will be the lamest of lame ducks during his final years in the Oval Office. We talked to T.W. Shannon last show. Today, another Palin-powered candidate is here, Chris McDaniel. He's endorsed by Sarah Palin as he runs for U.S. Senate in Mississippi. While Governor Palin gets ready to host her new show on Sportsman Channel next month, Todd Palin hits the small screen with some incredible coverage of the iconic Iditarod. Honoring World Down Syndrome Day, a brand new Commonwealth Common Sense with Susan Stimson is coming up, and just ahead our latest edition of Steel Resolve with Sarah Steelman. First, we welcome in Chris McDaniel from Mississippi. He's running for U.S. Senate, and he's endorsed by Sarah Palin. Chris McDaniel, thanks for joining us on the Palin Update on SaraNet Radio.
Hey, thank you very much for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
Congratulations on the huge Sarah Palin endorsement. What are your thoughts on having the governor behind your candidacy?
Oh, it's incredible. The people of this state love Sarah Palin. They always have. She's a spark for the conservative movement and stands for the things that we believe in, whether that be traditional values or limited government or liberty. So the people are responding. It's resonating, and we're very honored to have her in this race, and we can't thank her enough.
I've noticed you've been holding a lot of town halls and events to really meet people up close and personal. Do you find that helpful as you run for Senate to really know what's on the minds of people, hearing it from them themselves?
Absolutely. The whole point is to make sure that we're responsive to the will of the people. And so often men and women are elected to positions of authority or office, and they never return home, or they do infrequently. And we're seeing that here in Mississippi with Senator Cochran, who is very, very seldom in the state. We owe it as elected officials to be responsive to the will of the people. We can't do that unless we're around them, unless we're listening, unless we're communicating. And that's one of the things we've been doing. It's something we've enjoyed very much because our state is just an incredible place to be.
Sarah Palin has talked about the importance of getting into primaries and winning there first, so we have real common sense candidates in the general election. What is the state of the Republican Party right now, and is the way to fix it exactly what you're doing, challenging those incumbents who are not getting things done?
Absolutely, without any question. The party, for whatever reason, over the last several years has faded. There was a time where Reagan talked about this party being a bold party, bold colors, not pastels, a party of principle, not surrender. But over the last 2 decades or so, we've become a party of surrender in so many ways. And listen, I'm a proud Republican. I've been a Republican since I was 13 years old. But unless we're fighting, unless we're principled, unless we're strong, unless we're willing to sacrifice, we aren't being the salt or the light that we need to be to make sure this movement is successful. It does us little good to elect people in the Republican Party that are essentially Democrat-light. That is not my inclination. We're a party of conservatives, or we're not a party at all. We're a party of principle, or we're not a party at all. So I'm a big believer in courage and strength, and that's something that I've been very excited to see Ted Cruz do and Mike Lee do and Rand Paul do. They're beginning to stand for things that matter, not just re-elections.
The incumbent here in your race has played the go-along to get-along game, yet Haley Barbour and establishment types are backing him. Surprised?
Not at all. Not at all. I think that they've backed him for many years, and we see where that's gotten us. 42 years he's been in the U.S. or been in Congress, most of those in the U.S. Senate. And during that time period, we've seen a reluctance on his part to engage these very important issues of the day. No one can tell me the last time he led the charge on an issue of significance. And this is particularly true during the Obama administration, for goodness sakes. One would think that a senator from the most conservative state in the Republic would be leading every charge against President Obama's agenda, because it's been a nightmarish agenda. But Senator Cochran has remained silent. He's remained quiet. And in this environment, we simply can't afford for our senators to be silent. They have to be engaged. They have to be energetic. They have to fight with courage. But I'm not a bit surprised the establishment would support him, because that's exactly what they've been for the last 20 years, is relatively quiet. We need people willing to take a stand. And so far, Senator Cochran hasn't done that.
You've said Obamacare is a train wreck and must be repealed immediately. Ted Cruz has been pushing for the same. You just mentioned the Texas senator. Other Republicans are backing down, though. Talk about how you can stand strong and repeal this.
Sure. Well, Senator Cochran, he voted to fund Obamacare, not once, but twice. And the second time he did it in front of the entire country when Senator Cruz and Lee were standing there doing the very best they could to derail it. Here's the way I see Obamacare. I was the state's lead counsel in the Obamacare lawsuit. I represented Phil Bryant and 10 Mississippians in a class action. We did that free of charge, pro bono, because we feel that strongly about stopping Obamacare. This is not the type of enactment that needs to be fixed. We don't need to put Band-Aids on this. We don't need to tweak this act. Obamacare needs to be repealed in its entirety. This is not something that can be corrected. So I'm a big believer in repeal or defund, whatever it takes to get rid of that monstrosity once and for all.
And unfortunately, so many have said that, and then they get elected and go another way. That's why Ted Cruz, I think, has gained so much steam here with common sense conservatives. And you could just hear in Senator McDaniel's voice here the conviction of this, a guy you can count on. Now, sir, one of the pieces of legislation you got through as a state senator was the Mississippi Student Religious Liberties Act of 2013. And for people who don't know what that is, it protects students' rights to express their individual religious beliefs. There's a real attack on our liberties today, isn't there?
Absolutely. It doesn't matter which part of the Constitution we're looking at or examining, from the Fourth Amendment to the Second Amendment all the way down to the First Amendment. And folks, the Constitution is simply not subject to compromise. We have to draw a hard line in the sand, and that's one of the things we did with the Religious Liberties Act here in Mississippi last year. The idea is that our children do not lose their constitutional rights simply because they step inside a schoolhouse door. They still retain those rights. Whether those rights include writing a religious assignment, whether those rights include praying, whether those rights include a simple T-shirt that professes a statement of faith, they have every right to do so. And what we did, we passed a bill making that very, very clear, and likewise creating limited public forums wherein students could once again worship the God the way they wish. They could pray the way they wish. And that's very important for our free people, to encourage that type of activity in a school setting, because after all, these are places of learning, aren't they? And they should be places of tolerance for religious belief systems. But in the last 30 or 40 years, our Supreme Court has moved away from tolerance, and they basically suppressed those belief systems. We have to learn to fight again. And prayer and religious belief, that's an instrumental and indispensable component of our Constitution.
What can we do about the tax code? Right now it's over 60,000 pages. So what does Senator McDaniel push for there?
Oh, goodness. Sounds like a nice place to do another full repeal, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
It's 3.8 million words long, roughly. Everything Shakespeare ever wrote is only 900,000 words long, so that gives you some perspective on how bad the tax code is. Naturally, the progressive or the punitive scheme that we've got now punishes entrepreneurs. It punishes individuals. I'm not a fan of this present system at all. It's probably time to scrap it in its entirety and go with a very minor flat tax and make it fair across the board where everyone feels it, but at the same time make it low enough where the people retain their money. And it is the people's money. It's their fruits of the labor. And I'm not a big fan of government reaching down and taking that by force. So I'm a big fan in full reform of the tax system, no question about that.
You have a stellar record when it comes to our Second Amendment. The gun grab in Washington's at an unprecedented level. Will our right to bear arms be a top priority for you?
Absolutely. I'm an absolutist when it comes to the Second Amendment. We have an individual right, always have. God gave me that right when I was born, just as he gave me the right of free speech. And because he gave me that right, it's something that's inalienable or unalienable. It cannot be transferred, and government cannot be allowed to take it away. So in everything that we do, we protect that Constitution. The Second Amendment is one of the cornerstones of that document because it does preserve our liberty. And so naturally, in every act, we make sure that liberty is expanded, not restricted or suppressed. And I'm a big believer in the Second Amendment and will always fight for that.
You have a great family, and it shows that that's something you really care about because you authored a personhood amendment to amend the Mississippi Constitution. That's to protect all human life from the moment of fertilization, and you've also defended traditional marriage. Why is it so vital to fight for traditional values as a family man?
Oh, It's everything, isn't it? As the family goes, so goes the republic. As the ability for people to properly govern themselves, voluntarily govern themselves without coercion, the most local form of government we have is the individual, and right behind that is the family. And the idea that we can protect those children, the unborn, that's something the state certainly has a right to do and should do in every account and every occasion it gets. So very important to make sure those basic foundations of freedom and liberty in society are maintained. And so that's one of the reasons we fight for those traditional ideas.
Now, if kids can escape the abortion culture on the left, they run into other obstacles later in life, a broken education system for one. What are your plans for education? I know you're a school choice guy. You mentioned Shakespeare before. They're getting rid of the classics and having people read, instead congressional bills about diversity and nonsense like that. So I know it's a broad topic, but what are your thoughts, especially, a guy who has young kids?
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, the best way to handle the educational woes of this country is to get the federal government out of the educational business. I've read Article 1, Section 8. I see no directive in there for the central government to have anything to do with education whatsoever. So it's best to go ahead and allow the states and the people handle that as locally as possible. That's the first thing. And I say that because we've seen a track record of absolute failure from the Federal Department of Education. With that department created in roughly 1979, it spends $107 billion per year now, and I'm not seeing any significant educational attainment reached by those policies. I'm a big believer in local control of education. I'm very much against Common Core. I'm very much against federal standards in regards to education. So that's the big first step. Get the central government out of the educational business, and you'll see some improvement.
You have Sarah Palin's support. If elected, do you think you might consult her on issues, say, like energy? And what is your stance on domestic energy policies?
Absolutely. I would love to consult her whenever and however. I know she's an expert in that area. I know that she is very accomplished in her own right in many, many public policy areas. But from an energy standpoint, everything that ails this country is pretty simple. You open up the market. You allow the free market to dominate. You get government interventionism out of the equation. You remove politics out of the equation. You open up production. And if you do that, you'll see gas prices begin to come down. You'll see economic productivity as the result of that. But every time President Obama talks about a new idea, every time he talks about new energy alternatives, every time he moves down a subsidy path, the people don't have the predictability they need to grow their economy. And that's especially true in the energy sector.
Well, he is Chris McDaniel, and we have really enjoyed having you here today. A pleasure, sir. How can people learn more and help your campaign?
Hey, guys, thank you. I need your help. We obviously are in a tough fight down here. We feel like we're going to win this race, but we have to have the money and the resources to get from point A to point B. So McDaniel2014.com. It's just McDaniel2014.com. Come see us, come visit us, call us anytime. We'd love to have your help and support.
He's from the great state of Mississippi. I got to tell you, sir, my little ones, they have a thing about your state. They want to get there because watching the Gator Boys sometimes. They hear about these gators walking around. And my daughter, for some reason, one state she hasn't been is Mississippi, and she mentions it a lot. I said, why? She says, I want to wrestle a gator.
Oh, tell her to come down. We'll have a good time. We'll have to find her a nice small one to wrestle, though. These things get relatively large down here.
All right, send the big ones to Congress.
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir.
All right, guys. Thank you very much.
Visit McDaniel2014.com for more on the campaign. That's McDaniel2014.com. Sportsman Channel's new show, Amazing America with Sarah Palin, starts April 3rd. We're really looking forward to what's in store for us on the new program. This week, Todd Palin hosted Iditarod Unleashed, some special programming on Sportsman Channel that showed some great stories and behind-the-scenes footage of the Iditarod. Tune to Sportsman Channel to see the replay of the fantastic special and get ready for Amazing America with Sarah Palin next month. This past week, in honor of World Down Syndrome Day, Governor Palin posted a wonderful video that Bristol Palin had posted on her blog. It's a message to moms who found out that their baby has Down syndrome. It's really some beautiful, emotional footage. If you haven't seen it yet, be sure to give it a watch. You can access it right at saranet.net. And to see any of the governor's posts in their entirety, visit Sarah Palin's Facebook page and follow her on Twitter at Sarah Palin, USA.
It's time for Commonwealth Common Sense with Susan Stimson and Kevin Scholla.
Hello, Susan. Welcome back.
Kevin, hello. Nice to be here.
So as President Obama and the left continue to push forward their far-left policies ahead of these 2014 elections, you have to have some pushback from the other side. The problem is the GOP far from united on that front.
Yes, I think that there is a concern among Republicans, really among Americans right now, at the leadership, and it starts, from the top down. I think what we've seen with President Obama is he's been masterful and very, very determined on pushing forward his policy here in the United States. However, it's been divisive, and now that we have an issue that's a foreign policy issue, and we're seeing a lack of leadership, I think you're seeing among at least the Republican Party, there's a little bit of an exposure when you have that type of divisive leadership from the top down. Then comes the issues within the party itself, and we have a strong, large group among the Republican Party that's pushing back and saying enough, yet we see a lot of our Republican leaders, it's exposing that they're not really willing to get into this kind of battle, and maybe it's because they're not quite as dedicated to those principles as we thought, and this is the first time that they've really been pressed on them.
Yet they are willing to attack Tea Party members who are supposed to be in the same party, the Republican Party, a lot of them, although there are people who aren't Republicans certainly in the Tea Party, but a lot of those who are elected certainly are. But you see people like Mitch McConnell, this tough talk, he sounds like a WWE wrestler, the milquetoast, speaking these tough words in press releases and whatnot, saying, he's going to crush the Tea Party, going to put his foot on the neck of the Tea Party, things of that nature, paraphrasing here. But this is who he's attacking, instead of an administration that's bumbling and failing in foreign policy and far-left legislators that are taking our liberties away day after day. He's attacking Ted Cruz. I mean, it just doesn't make sense.
I'm not quite sure what has happened to our party, but this is not the party that I've spent the last 2 decades, volunteering and fighting so hard for, and being in elected office the last 4 years, just really implementing the principles of the Republican creed. But, as we were speaking today, that I'm in the middle of Eric Cantor territory, going in trying to help some of the grassroots that are literally being voted out of the opportunity to attend our district conventions and the statewide convention in Roanoke that's coming up this May, where we would select our U.S. Senate nominee. We have Republican elected officials that are rallying their people to show up at these meetings and vote out grassroots activists that have worked for years to even help get some of these people elected into office. So I think right now there's definitely a battle within the Republican Party, but I just wish that our leaders would turn toward what the opponent is, and it's not their fellow Republicans. So I think this is something that's just going to be a continued story.
And all you can really do is get them at the ballot box in a primary situation. That's what Governor Palin is doing right now. You see T.W. Shannon, for example, in Oklahoma, or Chris McDaniel in Mississippi. These aren't guys that have the nomination yet. They're going up against, establishment Republicans. So Palin has it right. It's not just these elected Democrat incumbents or challengers that you'll have to beat in November. You first have to knock off some of these GOP establishment types who are draining us in so many ways, just like the Democrats.
It seems to be the only thing that they understand. So yes, I would agree.
All right, Susan. Well, we appreciate it, and we appreciate that you keep getting up every day and doing these things, despite the fact that a lot of times it's disheartening when you see the results and not only apathy, but also just the inside baseball that's played by people in the party that we're supposed to be a part of.
All I can do is, just be faithful to the truth, and that's all any of us can do. So it's worth the fight.
Susan Stimson, talk to you next week.
Thanks, Kevin.
Susan Stimson in Virginia. More Commonwealth Common Sense next week. Now, our weekly commentary, Steel Resolve. Here's Sarah Steelman.
Thanks, Kevin. The sanctions that have been imposed on Russia remind me of how I used to send my sons into timeout. They were an aggravation, but if I really wanted the boys to understand the gravity of their transgression, I would take something away from them that they desperately wanted. That worked, and they didn't repeat the bad behavior because they hated the punishment. That's what we need to do to Russia. Russia is dependent on oil revenue to fund its central government and pay for their imports. We should ramp up our exports of oil and natural gas to the European community that currently relies on Russian oil. This is the kind of economic warfare that Ronald Reagan used very effectively to bring down the evil empire. President Obama signed an executive order directing Treasury to sanction certain sectors of the Russian economy, including energy and finance. President Obama should combine those sanctions with ramping up United States exports of oil and convince the Europeans to cut off their economic ties with Russia. That's the kind of economic punishment that would hurt Putin and the Russians. It would also help revive the economy here at home. Anything less than that will simply be sending Putin to stand in a corner for 5 minutes. Instead, let's hit him where it hurts. This is Sarah Steelman for SarahNet Radio.
Tune in again next week for another segment of Steel Resolve right here on the Palin Update. The Palin Update, including Commonwealth Common Sense and Steel Resolve, is on demand and available for download. So just head to SarahNetRadio.net, pick the show you want to hear, and you can listen anywhere, anytime. Well, that'll just about do it for this edition of the Palin Update on SarahNet Radio. Visit SarahNetRadio.net for continuing coverage of Governor Palin. Also, follow along on Twitter at SarahNet Radio, at Kevin Scholla, at Susan B. Stimson, and at Sarah_Steelman. Palin Patriots is our feature on SarahNet.net. Check out the writings from our great panel of contributors, including Dan Bongino, Martha Zoller, and Bader Carmoot. And I'm doing some writing for Breitbart News. Just go to Breitbart.com and search Kevin Scholla. I want to thank Sarah Steelman, Susan Stimson, and everyone here at SarahNet Radio. Thanks to Chris McDaniel, and thank you for listening today. Please be sure to join us again next time for another edition of the Palin Update. I'm Kevin Scholla. Have a pleasant day.